Hello, my name is Joe Foy, and I'm Protected Areas Campaigner for the Wilderness Committee, and today we're going to be talking about forests, in particular old forests around the Metro Vancouver area. A lot of people like to go out and enjoy the forests, and if you're one of those, then stick around for this video because we're going to be talking specifically about spotted owl old growth forest habitat, where it's located, what's been protected by the province and the federal governments, and exciting news that's about to come. Anything that I talk about today, I'll provide links to information, and basically, mostly I'm relying on the Wilderness Committee website at wildernesscommittee.org. You can Google that up. So let's go and have a look and see what the Wilderness Committee website has to say about spotted owls and their habitat. I'll just scroll down here to our spotted owl section, and we can see all sorts of information. Been a lot of news stories about spotted owl habitat. We'll touch on that today. I'm actually doing a series of videos. This is number 2 in the series about the various aspects brought up in our most recent education report. We'll scroll down here and we'll bring up the education report. There we go. Spotted Owl Forest Revival, which talks about the federal government's spotted owl recovery strategy, which they're about to release in March. So we're just in March 2025 now, and we're awaiting the release of that report. Now, we've seen the draft report, the draft recovery strategy. We talk about it in this publication. Pretty exciting because it recommends the protection of a further 2,000 square kilometers of forests in southwestern British Columbia, all within day trip of Metro Vancouver, to add on to the 2,000 square kilometers of spotted owl forested habitat that's already protected in provincial parks and other designations that the province has made. Now, when we talk about spotted owl habitat, there's actually a number of designations. The proposed designations of protected forest that the federal government has in their draft plan, soon to become finalized, but also provincial designations like wildlife habitat areas. So this video is to walk you through the various designations, where it actually is on the ground. So when you're out on the land, you can see it, you know what's protected, what could be protected. Also talk a little bit about how there are virtually no signs on the land. So when you go up a valley like the Chehalis Valley or the Nahatlatch or the Chilliwack or up around Whistler, you're not going to see any signs telling you that you're entering a protected spotted owl habitat area or a forest that's been proposed for protection. So that's why I've made this video, kind of walk you through it. And one of, I think, our most important resources is found on our website, and that's this map. And I'm just going to pull it up here into full size, push this back a little bit. So this is a map of spotted owl habitat and spotted owl range. So the first thing is this, to understand, is this sort of purpley line here. This is spotted owl range. This is the area where traditionally, for thousands of years, spotted owls have lived. It's just here in the southwest corner of British Columbia. Now, spotted owl range also goes down all the way into northern California, but in the Canadian portion, it's only within this area here, goes as far north as Lillooet, comes down to the US border. It's as far east as Manning Park. You can see Manning Park in here. And as far west as Howe Sound. And there's Howe Sound with Squamish right in there. So you can see the purpley boundaries, but it makes it a very interesting discussion because this is where 3 million people of Metro Vancouver and also the people of the Fraser Valley Regional District and all around this area like to recreate. It's where First Nations territories, many First Nations territories, all Salish speaking Salish dialects, all in this region. Ingnakatnak people in the Fraser Canyon, Musqueam people here down in the lower Fraser, Stalo people here in the upper Fraser, Stat Tlahtliam people all up here in the upper Lillooet River region. And so a really interesting, diverse population of First Nations people, of course, all have forests that are really, really important to them. This video is going to walk through the various types of forest, how spotted owl habitat is designated, what habitat is protected, what habitat is likely about to be protected. So the first designation I'd like to talk about is wildlife habitat areas. This is a provincial designation. And if I come over here to the left of the map and click on this little triangle, I can pull the sort of map key, but more importantly, I can turn on and off various layers. So if we come over to one of the wildlife habitat areas, this one with a white boundary, the white boundary on this map means that this wildlife habitat area is a no logging zone. The province actually designates two types. One you can't log and one you can log an awful lot. And we'll talk about why that was done in the history of that. This one happens to be that we're going to look at is at Elk Creek. It's very near Chilliwack, and we can see some dark green in here. This dark green is the proposed federal habitat, but just to keep things really simple for right now, we're just going to turn that off by clicking on this little eyeball here, and it disappears. So we have a much simpler map. So spotted owl wildlife habitat areas have been designated by the province. This one was designated as Elk Creek was designated as a no logging zone back in 2011. And that's sort of when most of these no logging wildlife habitat areas were designated. As I say, you'll see no sign. You wouldn't know that this is a protected forest unless you come to this maps. And there's a few other places you can go, but not many. So it's kind of important to understand this if you like to recreate or if you like to be out in the forest for whatever purposes. If we come over here to the entranceway to Manning Park, this is really interesting. This green area here, of course, is Manning Park. And when you come in the western gate of Manning Park, there's actually a corridor. You come up to the sign for Manning Park, you think you're entering into the big park, but really you're just entering this long, skinny corridor of protected forests. The forest just a short distance from the road on the western side are not in the park, which made it really important that we were able to get the province to designate these valleys on both sides of Manning Park as protected wildlife habitat area for spotted owl. And so here, 18 Mile Creek, this is actually the creek where the Ghost Pass hiking trail goes up. Here's little Ghost Pass Lake up here at the top end. You can see where logging has encroached on Ghost Pass Lake, but not in the wildlife habitat area. So the first thing that we know here is that wildlife habitat areas, which have no signage, wildlife habitat areas for spotted owl that are no logging, really protect some important places, hiking areas, places that we all like to visit and recreate in. Now, this area here, this little creek here is La Forge Creek, and totally intact little valley at the western gate of Manning Park. Would have been logged, but the wildlife habitat area protects it from logging, and that wildlife habitat area is there to protect spotted owl habitat. Over here at another intact valley that has this wildlife habitat area designation is 26 Mile Creek. It is in the Manning Park donut hole, and we would have lost that early on had it not been in a spotted owl wildlife habitat area. Now the Manning Park donut hole, you may know this was the site, quite a big Wilderness Committee campaign, and we finally got that off limits to logging and off limits to mining, and pending negotiations with First Nations on exactly what kind of legislation should be done to protect this area. We're looking forward to seeing this whole donut hole area becoming a protected area. But certainly part of holding on to it so it could become a protected area was this wildlife habitat area designation. Now, spotted owl populations have declined very steeply over the decades that I've been working on this issue, and I've been working on this since the mid-1990s when there were up to 100 spotted owls in the forests of southwestern BC. Today, we know of only one wild-born spotted owl remaining on the forest. So in the whole range here, that one last spotted owl is in the Fraser Canyon area. This is all due to continued clear-cut logging of their habitat, which means that protected habitat is really, really important, and so is restored habitat, because too much old growth has been cut. It's why the population of spotted owls has dropped so fast. Now, there is hope for the spotted owl. Over here in Fort Langley, there is a spotted owl recovery center, a captive breeding center, where something like 30 spotted owls live in cages, and those spotted owls are being raised to be released into protected habitat. Now, you can see that in the Fraser Canyon, especially around Spuzum First Nation, there's a whole cluster of spotted owl wildlife habitat areas, including here in the Spuzum Valley on both sides of the Fraser Canyon. So this is a really important place, and it's where attempts have been made to release captive-born spotted owls. Unfortunately, there's been, I believe, 3 attempts, and the owls have not survived through the winter. So more effort needs to be taken by provincial biologists to ensure the survival of the species. But you wouldn't know from signage that so much forest has been set aside in the Fraser Canyon around the Spuzum area, specifically for the protection of spotted owl habitat. If we come up here to the Nahatlatch Valley, we can see that the Nahatlatch Park, much like the Manning Park western side, is simply a strip along the Nahatlatch River and lakes. But to give it more environmental protection, we have the spotted owl wildlife habitat areas that kind of beef it up a bit. But key areas like this totally intact little valley is the Teapot Valley, which is full of spotted owl habitat. We'll look at that a little bit later, but not protected, not in a wildlife habitat area. And so Teapot Valley really shows that's a big, big problem with not enough habitat being protected, and why the federal government is now getting involved. Another intact valley, at least the upper portion of it, is Douglas Creek. Here, Douglas Creek drains into the northern end of Harrison Lake. Totally intact little valley, at least the upper portions of it, and you can see it's protected within a provincial spotted owl wildlife habitat area that is a no logging area. Now, the province originally designated all of these wildlife habitat areas in the early 2000s, but allowed logging in them all. In other words, you could log them something like up to 60%, as long as 60% or thereabouts was still in a forest condition, which was a disaster. It meant that logging companies were logging the best habitat out of each one of these. So, in an effort to try to get some sanity to their spotted owl habitat protection plan, given that the numbers of spotted owls were going down, sometime around 2011, in that range, the government decided to make many of the spotted owl habitat areas off limits 100% to logging. And that's how we got these spotted owl areas in the white boundaries, which have protected some really, really important areas. If you go to the Silver Skagit Road, for instance, for any of you that like to go hiking up to Eaton Lake, the Eaton Lake Trail, we would have lost that trail to logging had it not been incorporated in this particular spotted owl habitat area here on the Silver Skagit Road. So super important to protecting local areas. But in order to appease the logging industry, the provincial government then took some spotted owl areas and opened the door wider to logging. What they argued to the logging companies is, don't worry about these areas which we've put in 100% away from logging. What we're going to do in these other areas, which are marked in yellow, is we're going to allow even more logging. Even though they're called spotted owl wildlife habitat areas, they became target zones for logging. Really cynical. And it allowed the province to keep these areas called wildlife habitat areas for spotted owl, but in fact, logging speeded up in these areas, and we'll look at them on the ground a little bit in this video. For instance, this is Chehalis Lake, a very popular recreation area for people. This is one of the sacrifice wildlife habitat areas, and anybody going up to Chehalis Lake knows that logging is very, very prevalent here. In addition, the province has allowed this area to become a target shooting area. There's a big gravel pit now up in the area with gravel trucks running back and forth. So it's really become an industrial and target shooting zone. That's been reported in the media, but it's no way to protect Canada's most endangered bird species, the spotted owl, and to bring it back. Which is why, when you see areas like the Chehalis Lake, why the federal government has become involved. And so all of these ones, all of these spotted owl wildlife habitat areas in yellow are in fact open to logging, so that you can see the two differences here. So you can go on the Wilderness Committee website, you can get to this map. I will provide the links in this video, and you can, really zoom in. See, here's the Nahatlatch. You can zoom in and look at some of your favorite camping places, hiking places, see if they are protected in a wildlife habitat area for spotted owl, or like the Chehalis Valley, see if they're not protected. They're simply called a wildlife habitat area, but they're wide open to logging. There is hope that if we keep pushing, we can get logging out of these wildlife habitat areas, because none of the spotted owl wildlife habitat areas should be open to logging. Logging is why the spotted owl is critically endangered from disappearing from the province, why we have a captive breeding program, why we need to spend so much time and money in bringing this species back. It's all because of industrial logging. So I started off this video talking about the federal government has a plan. And so let's have a look at that plan. We'll click on this little thing here, this little triangle to get to our map key. So if I click on this little eyeball here, so the federal government, you see it's a whole different pattern for the federal government. They've looked at old forests, which is suitable spotted owl habitat. Spotted owls could move into it right now. But they've also looked at second growth forests, which could become suitable habitat in the next 50 years. So spotted owls require forests. It's about 120 years old. So if the forest could become 120 years old in 50 years, the federal government considered it for protection. What the federal government has looked at is forests that are connected, so forest corridors. So when you add in the provincial designation of the wildlife habitat areas, here we can see in the Fraser Canyon, and then you add on what the federal government is proposing, the 2,000 square kilometers that are not protected, you get a sense of essentially forested corridors that would allow young owls to be able to move over the landscape, which they can't do now. So it's very interesting. The federal government is proposing repairing the damaged forests of the southwestern BC. Those forests where 3 million of us live, all around the day trip region of Metro Vancouver. Very interesting proposal in some of these heavily logged areas like the Upper Pitt River, is providing kind of forested corridors to allow spotted owls, and by the way, other old growth dependent species, to start coming back, the land to start healing, and give some hope that we'll be able to hold on to these species. But also give us some hope that we're going to have old forests, not just the trees, but the wildlife that lives in the old forests. So I'm just going to make this disappear a little bit. It's also interesting to see within protected areas where spotted owl habitat still exists. So here we have Golden Ears Provincial Park. Here we can see Alouette Lake, and we can see Gold River here. And in the upper Gold River, we start to get into some really nice intact habitat. That's a great hike up in there. Here's Hector Ferguson Lakes. There's a trail to Hector Ferguson Lakes. So if you want to get up and see some really nice old growth forest, then the Hector Ferguson Lakes Trail is one of those places that's really worthwhile. We can see over here in the Chehalis, yes, there's been a lot of logging. See all these cut blocks here, but there still is federally mapped spotted owl habitat that's important for us to get protected. By the way, it's important to get all logging out of the provincial wildlife habitat area here, and really important to get this federal habitat protected so that we have some hope. Some of these corridors are getting pretty tenuous, but they still exist. Here around the little town of Desroches in the Fraser Valley, you've still got federally mapped critical habitat in kind of intact corridor right along the face here, but you can see that logging is very extensive in this area. It's really endangering these federally mapped corridors, and we have to act very fast to get these areas protected. Here's Harrison Mills. So the shape of the provincial habitat areas and the federal habitat areas are quite different, but together with working with the provincial parks, here's Garibaldi Park here, the wildlife habitat areas designated by the province, improving them by getting logging out of these yellow boundary areas, and then adding in the federal spotted owl core habitat, which are essentially corridors between all these areas, we start to get a pretty robust plan to hold on to old growth dependent species, to hold on to places that we all like to go and recreate and experience wild nature, to hold on to places special to First Nations. And so we begin to see the bone of an expanded protected area system here in southwestern British Columbia. Go on to the website. I provided the links. Have a look at the map, see how it works for you, and join the campaign to protect the spotted owl, to bring spotted owl numbers back, to provide healthy habitat for old growth dependent species. Come on aboard. Just getting out and seeing these places makes it all worthwhile. My name is Joe Foy. I'm Protected Areas campaigner for the Wilderness Committee. See you next time on our next video on this spotted owl series. Bye for now.